Hi Journeyers, I'm Tony Carnes from A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. Today we have a really special treat. We have Lauren Green with us, who is one of our most favorite people. From the very beginning she's been one of our most favorite people. And she's with Fox News Channel, and today she's going to talk about her recent trip to the Vatican. Welcome to the program, Lauren.
And I am special. I'm like your first guest.
That's right. She
We've
is
got
our
history.
award winner. She's our trophy on the wall. We know that this program will be good, and you should really see every minute of it. Lauren, you were over in Rome covering the election of the new pope, but when did I start? You hopped on the plane from here. When did you find out that you were going there?
Well, we got to back up into March because that began the cycle when the Pope Francis was in the hospital, in Gemelli Hospital in March, and he had turned critical, and so we really just hopped into gear. I mean, those kind of calls just come in the moment. It was doing laundry on a Saturday, got the call, you get on a plane tonight, finish the laundry, and you're there for almost 2 weeks. He came out of the hospital, but all of us journalists covering his time in the hospital just really felt that this was kind of a dry run, that it was not going to be long before we would have to return to Rome for, which would be the ultimate, which would be his death. And that call, of course, came on April 21st, just a few weeks later. I got a call at 5 a.m. saying the Pope has died, which was a shock because he was just in St. Peter's Square on Easter Sunday, shaking hands and talking to everybody. He just seemed in wonderful spirits, and to get that call at 5 a.m., oh my goodness, it was such a shock. And so had to get in really quickly to do a couple of hits in the studio, and then it became obvious, you got to get on a plane tonight. And, we're just getting everybody together, the producer and the camera people, and and the production staff is trying to find hotels for us as we're trying to get packed. And I remember, we have a 5:30 plane to Rome. I mean, this is how your day starts in this kind of world. And whatever plans I had for the week, and you do make plans, but they're all upset because some other story takes priority. And so that was the case.
Now, I want to ask just one little question. Is before the Pope passed away, went to heaven, did y'all prepare any sort of bio thing for him ahead of time?
Oh, yes. In fact, after the first stint in Rome, we updated his obituary. Mm-hmm. And just incorporate the stay in Gemelli Hospital in March. We had updated it, and you really can't update it with just putting in a few words because the recording system might be different, so you have to record the entire obit. So this is something they can run while the shows are kind of dancing around, like, what do we do? What guests can we get in here? So it's about, a 4 or 5 minute kind of piece that you can put on the air, and it tells his life story and the obit, and then the anchors can come out and talk about how exactly he passed away.
Is that something you work on, or is somebody else?
Well, the producers work on it. I actually worked the original obit. You know how there was a journalism program on, and they talk about how the young, interns will work on an obit, for, killing. It's like we always joke in news about how we work on obits for people who are completely healthy and they're here. But you got a new obit. It's like, oh, who are we gonna kill today?
That's
Is
right.
it Madonna? Is it this? It's like everybody's got an obit.
Yeah.
And especially over a certain age. Any famous person, every news organization has an obit for. People like Pope Francis, who had been in the hospital several times. That obit had been written and rewritten and rewritten and updated. And in March we updated it again to make sure that it was the last thing. And that's the obit that ran on April 21st.
Now, when you got to Rome, you did a few stand-up pieces, and then you filed a major story on May 3rd, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing lives all the time, and lives are just, they come in and go out. I mean, you're just putting together, bits and pieces, and you just do a live, what's going on. We had a couple of down days in between the funeral and the conclave. So Not a lot happening, but you just want to keep updated on what the cardinals are doing in their general congregation meetings. So we did a couple of stories. One at Gamarelli's, which is the family-owned shop. It's been 6 generations making vestments for the popes and clergy. So that's always an interesting story. And also with the priest who was head of communications for the Basilica. And he had his office, which was part of the Vatican, but it was not in the Vatican. It was an off-site location at this old castle, like a 1700s castle, and 6 of the cardinals actually had their offices there. So it was a very interesting place.
Oh, that's really, that's fascinating. I didn't know that they did that. Now, pretty soon you come into the gathering of the conclave, and you filed a story on May 8th, saying Prevost elected the first American Pope.
Yeah.
And you called it, I thought, shocking. And why was it shocking?
Because every expert said, and even if they wanted the cardinals to elect an American, there would be no way that they could elect an American as Pope. Now, this is very interesting because I did a podcast with John Allen, who, if anyone has followed the Catholic Church, you know who John Allen is. He's such an expert. He is the Vaticanista. And so he had on his Crux Now website, he had the papabile profiles. So he was profiling all of these cardinals he considered papabile, Pope material. And I asked him in the podcast, well, let's do the standard. Okay, they're not going to do an American. I mean, does American have any chance? And he goes, and then he went through the history of why Americans traditionally just didn't have a chance. First of all, it took too long for steamer ships to get over to Rome for the conclave. So by the time they got there, the conclave was over, right? The 1 or 2 cardinals that they had. Then we enter the phase where America is now a superpower. So you don't want the head of the Roman Catholic Church to be a part of a superpower. Where is he getting his directives from? Langley or something, or the Rose Garden or something like that. So I think that was a deterrent. Now, there really isn't that deterrent because America is not the only superpower, right? So now you've got another are we going to stay with the Eurocentric kind of Roman, Vatican, or are we going to go to Latin America? Are we going to do this? And he said, if there is an American, this is Saturday before the conclave begins. He goes, if there is an American who has the biggest, strongest chance of becoming the Pope, it is Cardinal Robert Prevost. I went, really? And I had never heard of him. He goes, well, this is the thing. He's got, he spent most of his time outside of the United States, so in Peru. He now is the head of the dicastery for bishop thing where they choose the bishops. He recommends to the Pope who should be elevated to the level of bishops. In that role, of course, he met a lot of the bishops and a lot of the clergy from all over the world, right? He said, there are 3 things that you want from a candidate to be Pope. You want him to be a shepherd. You want him to be a pastor, to really to have that experience to lead the flock. You want him to be a statesman because you want him to have the power to sit across the table from the Putins and the Xi Jinpings and the Trumps of the world and say, this is the line we're not going to cross. This is where we are. And you want him to be a governor. You just want to keep the lights on. There's the administrative part of the Vatican. And he said, Prevost clicks all 3. And I went, oh, well, that's very nice. So I started looking at Prevost a little bit more, but still in the background. And then another American priest I interviewed afterwards, Father Roger Landry. And he was on the set of EWTN. And his job, because he speaks Latin and knows Latin, his job was to interpret the Latin when the Camerlengo, I think, it comes out and says in Latin, I present to you, and they're going to say it all in Latin. He says, I knew there were only 4 cardinals with the first name of Robert, but he was listening for Petrus, because he figured on the 4th vote, if they've elected the Pope on the 4th vote, It's got to be Parolin, Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State. It's got to be, right? And he's just listening for da-da-da-da, and he hears Robertus. He goes, what? What? And then he hears Franciscus, and he goes, oh my dear Lord, they just elected the first American Pope. And it was just shock. It really was shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the first baby boomer also.
First baby boomer, and you know what? It's interesting, and I know this is a small thing for an American to hear, to think about it, but I really do believe because of this, you're going to have different relations. Americans are going to have a different relationship with the Vatican. Mm-hmm. When he spoke on the loggia at the, I think it was the Angelus, and he said, Dallas, Texas, in a way that every American could understand it. It wasn't like, what'd he say? What? It sounded like Dallas. What? No, Dallas, Texas. It's like, oh my goodness, that just sounded like the priest down the block.
Yes.
That I think creates a different kind of relationship.
Yeah, that is a different relationship. And also it's an interesting thing, a technical thing, is that he comes from the order of Augustine.
Yes, Augustine. Yes.
Which has a vow of poverty, which means he doesn't file income tax. No American income tax on this Pope because he doesn't get any money.
He doesn't. I didn't know about that part, but my most impressive thing about his being head of the Augustine order was just the fact that both Protestants and Orthodox and Roman Catholics really look at Augustine for a lot of directives. I mean, here we've got a 4th century North African bishop, right? And so they're still following Augustine. All of us are still following. Before the schism, before the Reformation. So we're all going back to Augustine. Here you've got someone who's from that era, who's not born not long after, in relative terms for us, the First Ecumenical Council, which we're now celebrating the first 1700 years. So this is an amazing time to have this man who is a follower of Augustine. Think about it. Pope Francis was a Jesuit, which just means St. Ignatius, who came more than 1,000 years after Augustine.
Right.
So it's a different kind of mindset.
Augustine may well be the guy for our age.
Oh, he so is. J.K.A. Smith, who I think is an Anglican, but he's a professor and author, he's written a couple of different books, walking with Augustine or walking with, and he really updates Augustine in terms of a modern language, not language, but understanding how to apply it today. And it's just a powerful, powerful book. And it's a searching book too, because this is a man who, came from a broken home. His father left at a certain point. I mean, this is why this professor in his writings, he has this affinity with Augustine, and you've got Augustine, who is the son of an atheist father and a very religious mother, and who prayed for him, who wanted him to give his life to Christ. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until he kind of fell off the deep end, you really have that crisis moment where it's like, what do you really believe? So he analyzes his life through his relationships, through his desires, even through his licentiousness, and he understands it.
By the way, I'd like to remind the audience that you have a devotional book out that's really quite nice called Light for Today.
Thank you, yes.
And did I hear a rumor that you might be working on another book?
I actually am, and I've been working on it actually for years, but I just signed another contract to actually really get the manuscript done. But it's called Lessons from the Vineyard, and it really is the intertwining of blood and wine in the Bible, and this interesting metaphor. It's not just metaphor. And also, I say in the short term, this is my 10-second elevator pitch. There's, in vino veritas, there's a whole lot more to that phrase that meets the ear.
Really?
In wine, there's truth.
Yeah.
There's a great deal of truth in there, because in Deuteronomy, God calls wine the blood of the grape. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have the blood in Leviticus, which is the giving of atonement. Do not eat the creature with the blood. I've given it to you as a means of atonement. Do not eat the blood. then you've got and this I think will probably be the biggest sort of aha moment for maybe people, because it was for me. As I was looking at this, all of pop literature makes the forbidden fruit, which is never really called forbidden in the Bible in Genesis. They make it out to be the apple. I believe it was a grape, the grapes. And a 6th century rabbi talks about it. He believes they're grapes. I believe they're grapes. The narrative of the Bible makes so much more sense.
The sign of the blood of Jesus.
As the narrative and the fact that the blood in Leviticus, you cannot eat the blood. That's just, the blood is, the life of the creature is in the blood. And I've given it to you for atonement. Do not eat it. So there's no mention of an apple ever in the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, there are no apples, right? Plenty of grapes, plenty of wine.
Yeah, that's right.
But no apples.
There's a hip-hop artist named Propaganda who has, and he's really good. He's a West Coast, but he's got a song out called The Scarlet Thread. And he talks about the scarlet thread through the Bible.
Yes.
And actually, it's his strongest piece. It's a great piece.
Yeah.
So we look forward to the book. Thanks.
Yeah, I look forward to writing it. I mean, actually, I was doing a lot of research on blood and the Bible and wine, but now I'm actually reaching out to vineyards and asking them to tell me their stories of growing wine. It's the wine industry is huge in the world.
Right.
And I happened to buy a bottle of wine in the duty free called Habemus. Habemus Papam, right? We have a pope.
Yeah.
And great wine, by the way.
Oh.
And I wrote the vineyard owner and I said, I get this standard letter, tell me your story. And I told him about my theory about wine and the blood. And, when Jesus pours the wine, he says, this is my blood poured out for you. So that's a chilling kind of moment, I think, in the Bible. Now, and it's really, so I sent it to him, and he's actually in Italy, and he thought he was fascinated, and he wanted to talk with me about it. He invited me over. It's like, yeah, okay. Well, I was just in Rome for 3 weeks, and I'm now back, but
that's terrific.
Yeah, well, it's just
back at a vineyard, maybe.
Well, there are plenty of vineyards in America to go to. And I would love to probably go, but you got to consider your finances for that kind of thing.
I wanted to ask you. You talk about how things can, like Augustine talked about, that something went wrong with his life, or he had a deeper experience.
Yeah.
You came to New York from Chicago, I think, more or less. And how did New York impact on your faith?
Well, I'm from Minnesota, and I did go to graduate school in Chicago, and then the first job away from Minnesota was in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I went by Minnesota by way of Chicago and to New York. I think New York, and I think people might be surprised to hear this, but being in New York actually strengthened my faith.
Oh, really?
Yes,
How so?
Absolutely, because I met the ministry of Redeemer Presbyterian Church and Dr. Timothy Keller. I mean, it was just, this totally changed how I looked at my faith and how I looked at my life as a means of faith. And one of the things that became so powerful for me, and for many people who still listen to his sermons, and I still listen to his sermons, even though he passed away 2 years ago, is that faith was not something that was an accessory. It really was who you are. It wasn't something that you could say, well, you have faith and I don't have faith. No, everybody has faith. We are worshiping beings. We cannot help it. There is no vacuum. There's no blank slate when it comes to faith. There's no neutral position when it comes to faith. And he talked about God as a living reality or a concept. And this is why the first book says God is a living reality in a world that immersed in fog, is because, and he explained that, is God a concept to you or a reality, a living reality? And a concept is something you certainly believe in. It's like, I got a credit card. It's my concept. I believe in it because I believe I'm going to, buy some food with it, or buy a purse, or buy whatever it is. I believe in it, but I control it. I dictate how it is used. That's a concept. But a reality, God as a reality, is a reality that I must mold my life to. It's an objective reality that I have to mold my life to. And that was the difference. People, it's a simple difference. No, it's a huge difference between how you look at your faith.
Well, I noticed something in your reports from Rome, but in other reports too. There seems to be a different nuance you give to the reporting that seems rooted in who you are in faith. I remember one of your stories that was really a wonderful phrase. You talked about the white smoke, the crowd roared, and the bells of St. Peter's Basilica pealed in joy. And I thought, 1, 2, 3, and well, you're ready to peal in joy. And I thought, you know what? That's like a hymn. I thought that was. I said, you know what? She's really touched a vein of what was going on there.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You know, when you're there, it's an inspiration in itself. I could only write what I saw and felt.
Well, but the way you picked it up, it's not like that you were preaching or anything. No, not like that. It was like you picked up the deeper reality going through people's emotions and heart there, that you could touch it through your words. I thought that's the highest type of reporting.
Thank you.
You mentioned about St. Augustine having his life upturned then turning toward God. And many things upturns our life or brings us to look to deepen our faith, to grow in our faith, or come to faith.
Yeah.
And one of those, I'm always curious that you moved from Minnesota to Chicago to New York, and I was wondering, how did New York impact on your faith?
Well, I mean, obviously, New York, I think you would think that in New York, sort of, let me lose my faith. And actually, I got closer to my faith. I deepened my faith in New York.
No, that's shocking.
Well, it is. Well, that is shocking. But the reason is that I always went to church, even in Minneapolis and in Chicago. Went to great churches. I was baptized in a church in Evanston, Illinois, in graduate school, and when I came to New York, I started going to another church, and then by happenstance, somebody gave me a CD of a Tim Keller sermon, and it absolutely blew me away. I mean, it blew me away. I listened to it like 2 or 3 times in a row.
Tim Keller is a pastor.
Tim Keller he's deceased now. He was pastor and founding pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church, and I had never heard preaching like this. I said, this is exactly what I've been looking for, and so I consumed it. He is the proverbial teaching you how to fish, not just giving you a fish to eat, but teaching you how to fish. And it just changed my life in a way. It deepened my faith, got involved in a Bible study and reading the Bible, reading everything that had to do with commentaries and like Augustine and C.S. Lewis and Francis Schaeffer and J.I. Packer's Knowing God, which really changed a lot of my thinking about understanding the faith, understanding that there is nothing more important than knowing God, and that is the defining element of this life, to know God. So and it changed. The Tim Keller ministry was basically based on, is God a reality or is he a concept to you? And he asked the question, which I was just so probing. And he said, a concept is something that you believe in. I mean, it's like a credit card. You take it out, you use it, you put it back in your wallet, but you basically control how it's used, right? I determine when I use it, how I use it, and how much I spend with it, right? But I control it always, it doesn't control me. God as a reality is an objective reality that you must mold your life to. You don't control it.
Now, it seems to me that just looking at your reporting in Rome, for example, that this change to deepening, I guess you would say, your faith, rooting into sort of a transcendent reality that becomes just part of your daily life. It seems to me I could detect that in the way you report it. This phrase that you did on your May 8th report, it is such a wonderful phrase. You talk about the white smoke, the crowd roared, and the bells of St. Peter's Basilica pealed in joy. And I thought, oh, this is a hymn. But it's a hymn in the sense that you caught what was coursing through people at that time.
Coursing through us all. I mean, to be in that right there on the Via della Conciliazione and seeing the big screens and hearing the crowds, and it was such a mesmerizing moment before even the Pope comes out, you know, because they know that the seat of St. Peter is no longer vacant. We have a Pope. We just don't know who he is yet. We have a Pope. And then of course, that became part of the story.
So the power in that way you delivered it, there was power too. You didn't have, I was looking to see, well, what's her face going to be like? Is it going to be, or something like that? No, there was a small smile. It's much like you're doing right now. And then a warm, personal, matter-of-fact recounting of what you're seeing around you. And that made it even more real. Do you know what I'm talking about? It is like, oh, she's just not, you know, putting all the emotion on because she's going to get the TV audience, or not negative, or it was. You were professional, so you kept your smile down, and but you by doing that, you allowed your description of what was going on around you to really come through.
You know, I have to, well, thank you very much, first of all, but being inspired by, first of all, the Vatican's very good at filming everything. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot more access to a lot of the things that I might not have had access to, which is always inspiring when you see the pictures and you can kind of write to the pictures you have. That's the rule about TV news. You can't write to what you don't have video of.
Right.
Well, there's another saying, it's like, if we don't have video, it didn't happen, right?
Yes.
But you know, so that you've got to give credit to the Vatican News because they're very good at giving us the video that we need. But there's just one of the things about the conclave which happened during, as you know, sort of secular media covers it. They had no template for religious elections. The conclave, because their only association with conclave was the movie, which was very, okay, I'm just going to say bad, when it came to understanding the spiritual aspects of the conclave. It never really captured that. So the template was American political games, right? That's basically what the movie Conclave was about. But the real conclave is much different. And you heard Cardinal Tobin talking about this in the news conference afterwards. And he was talking about this being his first conclave, maybe his last, but his first conclave. And he said he was just changed and transformed by the spiritual intensity of it. Mm-hmm. There was an incredible responsibility there as you pray, as you seek the Holy Spirit, and as you're looking down, as you're looking under the Michelangelo's fresco, The Last Judgment. I mean, if that doesn't say to you it's serious business, you know, what else, right?
Yes.
And you're making this oath. This is, and also the secular media tended to want to look at it as Pope Francis's successor. But the church always had in mind that it was the successor of St. Peter, the 267th successor of St. Peter, who Christ gave the keys to the kingdom, mm-hmm. right? This is Peter, of whom Christ said, on this rock I will build my church. And the next phrase was, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. That to me says so much about the power of the church in terms of we need to be the successor of St. Peter. Popes are human, they can come and go. But when you're talking about the successor of St. Peter, he is no longer Cardinal Robert Prevost. He is Pope Leo XIV.
That's what Cardinal Dolan said. It says he doesn't have the name Robert Francis Prevost anymore.
Right.
He's Pope Leo XIV.
Yes.
And I thought that was such a profound and even disturbing way that Cardinal Dolan put it, but it's exactly what you're pointing to, that because it's pointing toward eternity.